So here we're going to review factoring quadratic equations. And in this case here, we're going to use what's called the product sum method. And the product sum method is the way of solving certain quadratic equations. When I say solving, I mean factoring. And so if you look here, if this here is a quadratic equation that you are trying to factor, what's going to happen is this. You're going to try and come up with numbers that multiply together to equal 2. And then when you add them together, they're going to equal 3. So one way of doing that is just this idea of listing all the possible combinations of making something times something else that makes 2. Really, there's just one way of doing it. 1 times 2. So since we have a plus here and a plus here, it has to be this pattern, plus and plus. And then we just say, okay, well, does 1 plus 2 equal 3? Sure it does. So then we just put a 1 and a 2 there. Now in this problem here, same sort of thing. I'm going to come up with all the ways I can make 15 until I come up with the right one. So one way of making 15 is going to be 1 times 15. Another way of making 15, and the only other way is 5 times 3. So which of those two ways, when you add them together, equals 8? So I got to go ahead and add together equal 8, and when I multiply them, they equal 15. Well, in that case there, obviously, it's going to be this one here. So it's going to be plus 5 plus 3. So here we have a different pattern, and the pattern here, really important to look at and see, is we've got a plus here. So the numbers are either going to have to be a multiple, it's either going to have to be plus here, or alternatively, it has to be minus here and minus here. Because if I multiply whatever number goes here, and they're a minus and a minus, then when I multiply them together, I'm going to end up with that positive symbol. If they're both pluses, same thing. I'm going to end up with that positive symbol. But the key difference here is I've got this other pesky little part here. That means that they both have to be minuses. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start listing numbers together that multiply together to equal 20. But when I multiply them together, both of them are going to be negative. So let's list them. Well, there's going to be negative 1, negative 20, negative 2, negative 10, 4, and 5. And I think that's it. So now which of those two, when I add together, equals negative 12? Well, of course, it's going to be this one right here. So that's going to be a 10 and a 2. And the order doesn't matter here in terms of where the 10 and the 2 go, because both of them are going to be subtraction. So let's look at the next one here. So the next one here is going to have the same pattern. Again, we got that addition part here. So we know it either needs to be minus and minus or plus and plus, because that's the only way of getting that plus 6. And then we look over here, we see that negative subtraction. So that means it has to be that negative and negative pattern, because that's the way it works. So if we look here, we're going to look and we're going to try and make 6, but it has to be using negative numbers. So it's going to be negative 2 times negative 3. That's one way of doing it. Negative 1 times negative 6. Those are the only two ways of doing it. So how can I go ahead and combine those two and end up with negative 5? Well, pretty obviously it's going to be there right there. So negative 2 plus negative 3 is going to be negative 5. So my answer is going to be a 2 here and a 3 here. So here we go again, and again we got to pay really close attention to the pattern here. The first thing we're going to look at is this back number here, -8. Okay, so that means that I have to multiply a negative and a positive, because otherwise I wouldn't end up with that -8. And it doesn't matter which order you put them in. It could be that way, or it could be this way. It doesn't matter. Either way. So now I got to figure out what ways can I use multiplication to make -8. So -8, it's going to be here. There's only a few possible ways of doing it. It's either going to be -4 times 2, -8 times 1. Or alternatively, don't forget, it could be 4 times -2, or 8 times -1. Those are the only possible ways of doing it. So now what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a way, when I add those two numbers together, to get -2. And the only way that works is that very first one. A lot of times as you get better on this, you'll be able to choose those pretty quickly. So -4 and 2. So -4 goes with here, because it's a subtraction 4. So that's -4. And the 2 goes here. So down here, this next one, what we have here is, again, that pattern of, we've got the negative at the end here. So that means it has to be a negative and a positive. As I said, the order doesn't matter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and figure out a way of making -6. So one way of doing that is -3 times 2. Another way of doing that, -6 times 1. Another way of doing that, don't forget the reverses, -1 times 6. And lastly, 3 times -2. So which way out of all those, when I add together the factors, does it work that I'll end up with 1? Remember, because this here is a 1, it just doesn't have the 1 in front of there. If it helps you to put the 1 in there, that's perfectly fine as a reminder. So which way can I add them up to equal 1? Well, in this case here, that doesn't work, so that'll give me a -1. This would give me a -5. This would give me a +5. I'm last left with this one here, and that will give me a +1. So it has to be a 3 here because it's a +3, and a 2 here because it's a -2. So let's look at this example here. You can pause it if you want, and I'll show you the answer in a second. So what's going to be the pattern here? Okay, well, I've got that addition here. So it either has to be plus plus or minus minus. Then I have that subtraction piece there, so that gives me the idea. Oh, well, it has to be then minus minus. What's this going to be? How can I make +18 in a multiplication problem? -2 times -9 times -2, -18 times -1, -3 times -6. Believe that's the only 3 ways of doing it. So which way, when you add them together, do you end up with -11? Yeah, right there. It's going to be 9 and 2. Let's try another one here. So here's another one. Pause it for a second if you want to try and figure it out yourself. So x squared plus 9x minus 22. So pause for a second. Okay, let's try it now. So in this case here, those two clues, -22. So I have to end up with a multiplication problem that ends up -22. So one of these is going to be negative, one of them is going to be positive. How many ways can I make -22? Not very many. Well, I can go ahead and do -2 times 11. I can do 2 times -11. I can do 22 times -1, or -22 times 1. And which way is the only way I can go ahead and add those two up and I get 9? It's going to be that first one there. Because negative 2 plus 11 equals 9. So that's my answer, 2 and 11. So here's another one. In this case here, we're looking right there, that last number, plus 7. So how many ways can I make plus 7? Well, again, looking at that and that, both of them have to be positive. So there's only one way of making positive 7 with positive number, or positive 8 with, or there's only one way of making positive 7 with positive numbers, and that's going to be 7 times 1. We do it with negative numbers, negative 7 times negative 1. We're just working with positive ones. And does that work? Does that add up to 8? Sure does. So we're done.